Welcome back, agents. This week we are celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the Battle for Brooklyn DLC. I've covered the DLC in many of my videos since it released in May 2025. There were a few things that became apparent after launch that were either missing, unused, or not complete, and I covered those in videos that will be linked below. The Brooklyn Anniversary Event Pass is now live and offers some apparel items for both the free and premium tracks. Coming up, we have a new global event and a new hunter puzzle to be solved within Brooklyn. The global event is centered around the purple flame that we saw used extensively in the DLC missions and in the open world areas. The main focus for this video, however, is to talk about nostalgia and how it affects content that is added to the game. Specifically about how so much of The Division has been brought into its sequel, what that means for both games, and where it takes us in the future. I really like the term nostalgia bait to describe what happens when aspects of a game are ported over to a sequel. The biggest of these is arguably Brooklyn itself. It was only used briefly at the beginning of an agent's experience in The Division. You made your character, got to learn about your weapons, the basic movement and combat mechanics of the game. You were then quickly transferred to Manhattan, where the rest of the game took place. At no point was it possible to return to Brooklyn without creating a new character. I would have liked to see Brooklyn expanded during the Division's lifespan, either as a map expansion with missions and open-world activities, or similar to the original E3 version. The now somewhat iconic gameplay demo and trailer video from E3 2014 showed agents fighting at the police precinct. When they successfully clear the area and move to extract, they are warned of other players in the vicinity. The map is slowly revealed to be a much larger area than what we ended up with, and with multiple dark zones. Though that was a demo of the game 2 years before release, it's sad that we never got to experience that ourselves. I can see why Brooklyn was an obvious choice to be made into a DLC, and I'm glad we got to see it become a new map with an amazing open world, new missions, and an atmosphere on par with The Division. But I would be a fool not to admit it was a huge nostalgia trip, and that can only have worked in its favor. Overall, the DLC was an excellent addition to The Division 2, and I say this every time, but I still like to go back and play in that area to this day. Moving on from the DLC, I want to talk about how the nostalgia bait seems to be never ending and is becoming a problem. I have played The Division 2 for such a huge portion of the last 18 months that it has been easy to forget where we came from in The Division. There are always going to be overlaps between different installments of a game franchise, and The Division is not unique in that respect. In compiling some thoughts for this video, it quickly became apparent just how much we have seen brought across from the first to the second game. Right from the start, we saw items such as the lightweight M4 brought into The Division 2, although it was heavily changed from its original. No longer a fan favorite assault rifle, it had been changed to a regular rifle, had its RPM lowered, and at the time was only manual fire. Later on, there were changes to make rifles fully automatic, but it was still not enough to make it as worthy as its predecessor. The Striker gearset was an easy choice for damage, increased handling, and to increase your agent's combat effectiveness against high-level and armored enemies. In many ways, it made sense to bring it forward into the Division 2 at the time. However, after many tweaks and improvements, it has gone on to be the most dominant gearset in the Division 2 and stands above all else for damage output. The original version of the set in the Division 2 was much more balanced than it is today. Title Update 14 in December 2021 saw a change to the set where missed shots would no longer remove stacks. Title Update 16 in September 2022 saw further changes to the set overall, as well as the backpack and chest. A change to the damage calculations from multiplicative to additive was promised for Title Update 16.1. However, today you can calculate how it works and it remains multiplicative. Not only that, but it works independently of any other damage multiplier, which is one of the many reasons it continues to be so strong. I say this every video, but Striker needs a nerf or a rework, especially now it is dominating even more with Prototype. But we will come to that later. Year 7 saw a surge in the number of things that were pulled from the Division into the Division 2. We saw the return of weapons such as the Pecan, gear pieces like the Nimble Holster, and gear set talents like the Alpha Bridge. With the anniversary season in March 2025, we also saw the introduction of the Big Alejandro. Close enough to being a carbon copy of the original, the exotic talent is stronger in the Division 2. The Tinkerer mask was introduced in the first season of Year 7 as a reward for completing the seasonal climax mission. It offers much the same concept as the original Alpha Bridge gear set, only it does not work with named or exotic weapons. The Division 2 has only one talent per weapon, so with the Tinkerer it adds the talent from your secondary weapon to your first. The Catalyst mask was added as a DLC exclusive item, only available as a random drop from the Marauder drone at the end of the Army Terminal mission. It inherits the concept of the Pharaoh mask from the Division, and adds in some increased weapon damage, bonus armor, reload speed, and status effects depending on certain circumstances. While it sounded good on paper, it was initially bugged, hard to get, and was largely replaced and forgotten once the Tinkerer became available. For the first time, we were able to build around threat modifiers with the introduction of the Imminence Armaments brand set. Previously only seen on weapon mods in the Division, now we could purposefully spec into additional threat or reduce it with the cloak named knee pads. The Streamline talent, which grants increased weapon damage when no skills are on cooldown, felt like it was inspired by the way Barrett's bulletproof vest was tied to skills. Though the vest gave you bonuses for 3 different scenarios, Streamline only remains active if you refrain from using your skills. Originally, the talent granted over 80% weapon damage, but was reduced to just over 40% following feedback on the PTS. The Measured Assembly gear set takes a loose idea from the final measure set in the Division and makes it more relevant to the sequel. Rather than providing support and bonuses from diffused grenades, it instead offers healing, the ability to destroy nearby hostile skills, and is intended to be paired with a Hive or Smart Cover. Smart Cover itself was brought over with the same mechanics as the first game. 2 variants allow for either increased damage and handling, including a huge buff to the team's damage to targets out of cover, or to provide a big stack of bonus armor and other more defensive buffs. The Huntsman named Assault Rifle, which was the final reward for defeating the 8 Brooklyn Hunters, was presumably added as a nod to the fan-favorite Bullfrog in the Division. To my mind, it makes sense for it to have been added at the same time as the Tinkerer. The Bullfrog and Alpha Bridge were so often paired together in their prime era in the Division, but it could also just be a coincidence. Technically today, with there having been so many weapons, gear sets, and talents brought into the Division 2, you could actually have 3 builds from the Division rolled into one. If you were to use Tinkerer, 4 pieces of Striker including the backpack, and a high-end chest piece with the Unbreakable talent, you would be using Striker, Alpha Bridge, and Nomad at the same time. At the time of recording, the public test server for next season is live. In Year 8 Season 2, we will see the return of the Caduceus Exotic Assault Rifle. While the PTS is very much in its early stages, the current iteration of the weapon is getting mixed feedback. Some say it is extremely weak and will be dead on arrival without a significant buff. Others, including myself, are concerned not only about it being introduced in the first place, but also because of how the talent works. Originally, it was designed to work with critical hits and would heal your team based on your skill power. The new version will continue to work with critical hits, but will now heal based on the value of the damage for that critical hit. What this does for the game in general is further encourage players into the idea that DPS is king. While it's hard to argue that such a statement is incorrect, considering how little worth there is to armor cores and how skills are so weak in end-game content, this kind of doubling down on DPS doesn't help anyone. I had hoped that the Caduceus would work in a similar way to the Capacitor, where skill tiers would increase weapon damage, and perhaps firing the Caduceus could increase your repair skills. While the subject of prototype gear deserves its own video, I feel like it is worth mentioning how it has come about in a not dissimilar way to classified gear sets in the Division. On launch, Prototype was a rare drop and intended to be a new grind for veteran players with nothing left to play for. As this season has progressed, we have seen many changes and updates to the drop chances, sources of the prototype cores, and we now have a vendor where we can buy caches for random items. At the time when classified gear sets were introduced, it felt like the old game with high-end pieces, exotics and gear sets being mixed together had been entirely replaced. Classified gear was, and still is, reasonably rare to find outside of global events, but it has always felt like an optional grind. Not only that, but it was limited solely to gear set items. Now we have Prototype that completely replaces all items, not dissimilar to how the game replaced all its items in Year 2 when the level cap was raised from 30 to 40. So now in my mind it feels like they took the concept of classified sets, extended it out to everything in the game, and from what I've seen in the community so far is being chased like it's the only way to play. Next season you will be able to buy Prototype caches with Dark Zone credits, and I wonder if it's only a matter of time before Prototype gear will start dropping outside of escalation missions. Looking forward to the rest of Year 8, we have a new incursion, the Central Park DLC and the Survivors game mode. Central Park was always thought to be an intended new location for the Division. You can see on the map that it joins up with Dark Zones 7 to 9, and in some of those adjacent checkpoints, it even looks like there was perhaps meant to be a way to exit to the park. Lastly, we come to Survivors, the promised updated version of the original Survival from the Division. For the longest time, it has been brought up as something that should come to the Division 2, but never looked like it would. Now in Year 8, we are getting a snow-covered Washington, D.C., and what we assume to be a survival and extraction game mode similar to the original. Survival was the first of its kind, and is still an incredible experience today. The atmosphere, the gameplay, the mechanics, and the soundtrack all make for a game mode unlike any other. While I'm intrigued to see how good and successful Survivors will be, I hope the magic of the original is never lost or overshadowed. Not just for what it has done for the franchise, but for gaming in general too. Survive Fest was a week-long event in December 2025, which was intended to celebrate survival and encourage new and old players to return to the blizzard-like conditions of New York. While the player population was the highest we've seen in years, it quickly highlighted ongoing performance issues with the game's servers, to the point where it had to be canceled after a few days. Survive Fest returned later in January 2026, but it felt like the momentum was lost. There were new unique and time-limited rewards on offer for completing extractions in Survival, but sadly they were only available in the Division 2. Since then, we have had a two-way crossover of apparel items between the Division Resurgence and the Division 2, so I'm not sure why there were no rewards in the Division for Survive Fest. It's no secret I'm a big fan of both games and have put most of my hours into the second game, by some considerable margin. But ultimately, I just wish there were more original ideas being introduced to the Division 2, and eventually also into the Division 3. Nostalgia only goes so far, and it's likely to hit saturation point sooner rather than later. Do you think it's okay to copy so many ideas from the first to the second game? Some items, like the pecan, are straight copies though with fewer talents and arguably add no value to the game. Others, like the apartment, which was a reference to the house exotic, at least offered a new talent, even though it was not as good. The Lexington assault rifle is a great example of a nostalgia hit that didn't directly copy an existing item, but it remains a special event item and really should just be added to the general loot pool. Let me know your thoughts on how the future of the game should be shaped, considering how much has been taken from the Division, and perhaps how likely it is for there to be more to come. I appreciate your support of my ranting and rambling on this channel, and hope to make some more videos for you here soon. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.